Hello, I'm Mary Glenn Peoples, and I believe that one of the most difficult jobs in the world is the job of parenting. Number one, there's not much you can study before you have a baby. You just have the baby and there you are. And there's a lot of confusion today as to how to really parent. I had a lot of children come to my house before the pandemic, and then they all stopped because they were afraid they'd give me the virus, and I miss them. But last week, a friend of mine sent me a DVD that I made 29 years ago. I was 60 years old, and now I'm approaching 90. And it's the first time in my life that I ever sat down and watched myself on video. I couldn't stand to see myself, nor have I ever listened to a tape because I didn't like the way I sounded. But I know it was the Lord leading me to sit down and watch this DVD that I made 29 years ago on parenting. I watched the whole thing, and it's an hour and a half. And I got so excited watching myself teach because nothing has changed. And everything in this series of parenting holds true today. And I got so excited because I can't do anything about the education system, and I can't do anything about politics. I really can't do anything about anything that's going on in the world today. But I can afford young moms and dads some information that was given to me many, many years ago that changed my life. Sam and I had 3 children, and we wanted the best for them, but we didn't know how to do anything. And then a dear friend came into our life, Dr. Henry Brandt, who was a clinical psychologist who believed that the Bible has the answer to every question. And he told me, he said, if you have a Bible verse to give an answer, you have an answer. If you don't, you just have an opinion. And so Sam and I put together this material on parenting right out of the scriptures. Therefore, it's true. And never have I been as excited over anything as I am coming across this information and having the facility called YouTube to send it out across the world. My prayer is that you young parents will listen and pass it on. And I just pray that this information will give you confidence and assurance that you know you're doing the very best you can for your children. And you can do everything right, and they can turn out wrong. So I don't guarantee anything for your children, but I guarantee you, if you put these into practice, when the job is done, you'll feel good about yourself. So God bless you, and thank you from the bottom of my heart for taking the time to listen to this vital information.
I learned after having 3 children, I had 3 children in 34 months, and they are now 32, 33, and 30. Sam was just 35, but they're 34 months apart. And after having 3 children, when they were about 4 or 5 years old, I thought I would go crazy. They were literally driving me insane. I couldn't keep my house straight. I couldn't take a bath. One would get hurt or run away. I couldn't do anything. And so I had a friend who came to see me, and he's a clinical psychologist, and I sat him down and I said, now you've got to help me with my children. And so he gave me just a few principles. He didn't tell me what to do because he didn't know what I should do for my children. He didn't know my children, but he gave me some principles. And then he left me with the freedom to take those principles and use them any way that I saw fit. And so what I want to do today is just sort of share those principles with you and then give you some illustrations, because I think parenting should be one of the most fun jobs we ever do. But you know, we need to be trained. You're trained to be a social worker, you're trained to be a school teacher, you're trained to be a nurse, you're trained to be a doctor, and there's no job as important as raising a child, and yet we're not trained for it. And we're just handed that baby, whether it's because you adopted it or you took it as a foster child or you gave birth to it, and then we're expected to know what to do. And so I want to just share these principles with you, and I want to tell you that there are two things every child needs. It doesn't matter their IQ, it doesn't matter their talents, their gifts, their personality, but there are two things we all need. And number one is love, and number two is security. Now, when a child has those needs met, then he's able to function in the community and in the home and in the school a whole lot better. But you know, the one thing that surprised me is that I had to realize that God is love. Now, I always thought that I would find the right husband, and I did. I've been married 37 years, and I found the right man. And he gets better every year. But he's not a source of love for me. I thought he would be, and when he started crossing me, you know, and not letting me do the things I wanted to do, I got all mad at him. And so I thought, well, I'll have a baby, and then I'll have my needs met. And that baby drove me crazy. And so I found out that, you know, as a little girl in Sunday school, I learned that God is love. Now, why did I never realize that if God is love, He's the source of love? I mean, it just never occurred to me. I thought people were a source of love. And I was trying to place myself in the right environment with the right people to have my needs met. And I learned that God is love, so He's the source. Just like when you drive a car and you run out of gas, where do you go to get gas? You go to the gasoline station. Why? That's where you get gas. So when you want love, where do you go? You go to God. Now, there's a verse in the Bible that says, "May the Lord cause your love to increase and abound one toward another." Now, I believe that God is the creator and the sustainer of everything. Everything. God created the universe. He created everybody. He created everything. He knows everything. And I believe that God became a man, and that was Jesus Christ. And He lived on this earth for 33 years, and He knows exactly what we go through because He experienced life. And then the extreme sacrifice is that He gave His life for us. And that's what Easter's all about. We celebrate Easter, and that's the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ, who was God. Now, I believe the Bible is the Word of God, and God left His Word for us. So He knows everything, He created everything, and He's provided all of the needs that we have. He has. Now you go to God and you ask Him to cause your love to increase and abound toward everybody. You might say, well now, if God supplies love, why do I need people so much? Well, God made us to need each other. But what do I need you for? What do I need all of you in this room for? I need you so I can share my love with you, so that I can enjoy what God has done in my heart with those people all around, so that I can enjoy God's love with my little grandchildren. I'm a much better grandmother than I was a mother. Maybe it's because they go home at night and I don't have to worry about their education, and when they get sick I don't have to sit up with them. Now the verse says, "May the Lord cause your love to increase and abound," and the word increase refers to the quality. And you know, we have a real problem in America today. The biggest problem we have is that people don't care about each other. We have all sorts of problems with people getting along. And we're trying to change that by changing the environment, by changing society, and I'm going to tell you that won't work. You can only change interpersonal relationships when a person's heart is changed. And the only way you can have your heart changed is to let God do it. Now, I believe that the most important place in America is at home. It's not in the community. It's not in the church. It's not in the offices. It's in the homes. I lived in McLean, Virginia for 2 years, and that's the wealthiest community in America. The highest IQs, ambassadors, congressmen. And do you know that in McLean, Virginia, it's against the law for a policeman to answer a domestic call unless he has 2 police cars? It takes 2 police cars to answer a domestic call because domestic calls are so dangerous. So we must conclude that money and position and power don't change a person's heart. Because you'll find more wealth, more power, people with greater responsibility living in that little community than any place else in America. And that's the only place I know that it's against the law for 1 police car to answer a domestic call. And so we got to start at home. And when you walk in your door to go home at night, or when you get up in the morning, you need to ask God to cause your love to increase and abound. Now, increase refers to quality, and that means that you will love people in a deeper, richer way. And that means you love people because God puts love in your heart. And you don't say, I love you because you are so smart. I love you because you are so nice. I love you because you are so rich. I love you because you are so attractive. I love you for your color. I love you for where you live. No, I just love you because it's God's love in me. Now that's the kind of love a child needs. You see, a child needs to know that he's accepted. That's the big problem. And you need to stop and listen to what the child hears you say. Now, I told you I have 3. And my first 2 were easier to raise than my 3rd one. Now, my 3rd one wasn't bad, but he was just very independent. And I know that Dr. Brandt, my mentor, told me one time, he said, boy, you get that guy going in the right direction and you'll have some kind of guy. Because he was what somebody else might call a strong-willed child. Now, have you ever heard of a strong-willed child? Everybody hopes they don't get one. But I want to tell you, strong-willed children are the best kind of children you could ever have. Boy, you just get a strong-willed child, and there's no stopping him. And that's a wonderful child. You know, people say, oh, he is so bad. No, he's not bad. He's just determined. Now, a parent's role is to see that that strong-willed child and that determined child goes in the right direction. You know what the problem is? Parents don't want to give the energy that is required to direct a strong-willed child. It's just a lot of trouble. Now, I used to go to the door, you know, and I would say to my children, dinner's ready. Mark, come in. I knew Mark wasn't coming. The other 2 would come. I'd say, it's time to brush your teeth. Mark, did you hear me? And you know, Mark went to school, 1st grade. And about Christmas time, the teacher called and said, Miss Peoples, I think you need to come over. I need to have a conference with you. And I went over to the school, and I was told that Mark was going to fail 1st grade. Now, how you like that? Fail 1st grade. I mean, if you can't make it through 1st grade, what's wrong? So I took him down to have him psychologically tested. They said, there's something wrong with this child. So I took him down to the University of Alabama, and I had him psychoanalyzed. And I remember I went down and I sat down with that guy, and he said, Miss Peoples, he said, you know, Mark has the idea that he is the reason for all the trouble at home. He feels like that he's a failure. And failure is so hard for him. And so he's gotten the idea now that if he's going to fail, he'd rather not try because it's too painful to fail. And so he's just quit trying. And he goes to school and he said, Miss Peoples, you need to realize, you know, what you're saying to Mark because you have somehow made him think that he can't do anything right. You know, I cried all the way home. I wouldn't do that to Mark for anything in the world. But I did. And so I went home determined to start listening to the way I sounded to Mark. And then I began to realize what I did. You see, I opened the door and I'd say, "Dinner's ready, Mark." So what was I doing? Immediately condemning him. And so I quit. Now, Mark never did like school. He just never did like school. But he got over that feeling of failure because I began to encourage him and I quit singling him out. Children need to be accepted just like they are. And I've about concluded that there are not as many rebellious children in America as we have rebellious parents. Because when children are strong-willed and determined and they want to try their little wings and they want to go out, they're a nuisance. And parents rebel because they don't want to put forth the time. Now you need to go to God and ask Him to cause your love to increase. But you also need for your love to abound, and that means, that's the same word as fountain. And that means it overflows. You just have ample love. Can you imagine getting up every day and having all the love you need for all the people that you come across? I mean, can you imagine? Y'all just sitting there looking at me like I got about 16 heads. I don't know if you're listening or hoping I'll hurry, but can you imagine getting up and knowing that everybody you're going to meet that day you're going to love? Can you imagine what a wonderful life you'd have? And it doesn't matter. Oh, now you'll meet some unpleasant people and they might hurt your feelings, but that's when you call on God and you say, "Oh God," or your children might dump their milk over, or make a mess on your new rug or your old rug or your no rug. And you can still love that child. Now that child needs love, and love includes acceptance. We go back to the Bible to see what love is. We have a lot of wrong ideas about love. Let me tell you what love is. You find it in the 1 Corinthians chapter 13. Just 4 verses, that's all. But it gives us God's definition of love. So when you go and you say, "God, I want you to cause my love to increase and abound," this is what will happen to you. First thing that says in there is that love suffers long and is kind. Now, there is no suffering that lasts as long as raising a child. I thought it would end at 21. But I got one 35 now and I'm still raising him. No, I'm not. He's raised, but he still calls me. And he still comes over and cries on my shoulder. And still comes over and tells me what's going on. So once you give birth to that baby, I'll tell you, it's for the rest of your life. And that's suffering. So I have to ask myself every day, okay, I got to do some suffering today. But you know what's important? Am I kind? Now, how do I know I'm a loving person? How would you tell if you're loving? You tell because when your kids do wrong, as you correct them, and we're going to talk about discipline, you're kind. I've had to get up and leave a restaurant. One time I had to get up and leave because I saw this well-dressed lady come in with this precious little 2-year-old girl. She had blonde hair and she was dressed so well, and they sat down there and the mother's friend came to join them for lunch. And they ordered their drinks, and the ladies got tea, and the little girl got milk. And the first thing the little girl did, can you guess what the first thing she did was? She dumped her milk out. And that well-dressed, well-groomed mother shook that child until I could not keep from crying, and started screaming at her. And she said, "I will never bring you out again. You make me sick. I'm so tired of you making a mess everywhere I go. I can't ever do anything for you. Do you understand?" And that precious little girl she knew better than to cry. I guess she knew if she cried, she'd probably slap her face. And so she just sobbed like that. And I just had to leave. I had to get up and leave. And I go in the grocery store. Do you ever go in the grocery store and you see mothers saying to their kids, "Get your hand off there. You don't touch touch that. I told you you can't have that. I can't do anything with you. Stop it. Oh, I just want to go over and say to that mother, oh, please don't talk that way to that child. You're all she's got. You're all he's got. And if you're the only person he has to look to, you talk to him worse than a dog. I hear parents talking to their kids, they wouldn't talk to a dog that way. They wouldn't treat their animals as bad as they treat their kids. So how do you know that you're a loving person? Because you're kind when they spill the milk. And because you're kind in the grocery store, as you tell them to put it back. Now, love doesn't mean you let kids get by with everything. Love doesn't mean you don't train them. Love means as you do it, you're kind to them. Love is patient. Now, raising a child, you got to tell them the same thing. How many times? Zillion. A zillion. I found another Bible verse that helped me understand myself and my husband and my children. And it's all we like sheep have gone astray. Each is turned to his own way. And what does that say? It says we all got one problem. What is it? We all want our own way. How much of the time? All the time. See, I always thought my children, something was wrong with my children. Because my oldest child just he just keeps his mouth shut and goes off and does what he wants to. And he's so smart, he doesn't usually get caught. So I thought he was a great child, you know. He was a sneak. He still is a sneak. I asked him, I said, Sam, weren't you a sneak? Aren't you a sneak? Mother, he said, what's wrong with you? I said, well, I just don't believe you were that good. I just think you kept your mouth shut and went off and did what you want to. Is that right? And he said, yes, ma'am. And then my daughter pouts. From 13 to 16, she just pouted. You know what that means? Said, her name was Dawn. She'd go in her room. She'd come out and she'd say, Mother, can I go to a party or somewhere? No. She didn't say a word. Just folded her arms and went in her room. Closed the door. Knock on the door. Dawn, are you all right? Yes, ma'am. What's the matter? Nothing. Why don't you come out? I don't want to. Are you mad at me? No, ma'am. Are you sick? No, ma'am. You ever known a girl like that? For 3 years, that's what she did. Now, what was she trying to do? Get her way. Then we had Mark. Now, he's like me, see. He's the strong-willed. He says, Mother, can I go? No, Mark, you can't go. Why? Because I don't want you to. Don't you trust me? It has nothing to do with that, Mark. I don't want you going there. Everybody else is going. I'm sorry. Mother, I'm sick of you. I hate you, Mother. I'll be so glad to get out of this house. Nobody else has to live by all these rules. You're making a fool out of me. Can I go? No. I'm sick of this house. Do you know Mark didn't move out till he was 26 years old? And do you know what I did when he followed me around like that? He's a big old guy. I mean, he was 17 years old when this took place. Poor Mark. Everybody knows about Mark, you know, because I always talk about him, and he goes places and tells people who he is, and they'll say, oh, yeah, I know all about you. But he's a good sport. He says that God has used him as a ministry in my life. And I used to go in the bathroom and close the door and say, oh, God, I'm so sick of him. I'm so sick of his mouth. I'll be so glad when he gets out of here. But, oh, Lord, Mark needs a mother that loves him right now. He is so mad at me. He really does hate me because I won't let him have his way. Now, Lord, at this moment in time, Mark needs me to love him more than at any other time. And so, Lord, would you please cause my love to increase and abound? Do that for me, God, right now, so that I can walk out of this bathroom and love my child. Because right now, he's a needy little boy. And you know God would change my heart. And I just have to tell you that Mark married about 4 or 5 years ago. Well, I came out of the church, and there he stood on his wedding day. And I wondered why he was still there, and I walked down the steps, I remember he dropped Nancy's hand, his new bride, and he just stepped forward. He's about 6 feet tall and weighed about 210 pounds. And he picked me up in his arms. And he hugged me so tight. He never said a word. The mouth. But he never opened his mouth. But he squeezed me so tight. And then he just sat me down and turned around and took Nancy by the hand. And they got in a car and drove away. And I stood there and watched that car go down the road, and it turned to the left. And they put the brakes on, the brake lights came on, and turned to the left and disappeared. You know, that was my baby. All 210 pounds of him. He was gone. And I didn't have another chance to go in the bathroom and close the door. And I stood there on the steps of that church that day, and I said, thank you, God, for the bathroom. Because you know what Mark was saying to me that day? What do you think he was saying? That's right. And he was saying, I love you, Mom. I mean, you don't go take somebody in your arms and hug them, do you? Unless you're saying, I love you. That's what it means, doesn't it? And so I just want to say to all you young mothers, you just get one chance. And Mark was 29 years old when he got married. 28, I think. So I had 28 years to have love in my heart for that child, who was a strong-willed, determined. But you know, today he's successful. He's successful. So love is patient. Now, where does love come from? God. So how do you get to be patient? You don't get up every morning and grit your teeth and say, I'm going to be patient if it kills me. Have you ever done that? Because it'll kill you. I mean, that's what causes high blood pressure. That's what causes ulcers. That's what causes stomach problems. That's what causes spastic colons. It's when you get up and you say, I will do this. And so you determine. And then you tense up every muscle in your body and you set out to do it. And I'm here to tell you, there's a better way. There's a wonderful way to be a patient mom or a patient dad. It's just to say, God, you make me that way, okay? Now you say, well, how do I know he can do it? Well, just look around at all he made. If you believe he's the creator and he made everything in the world, then what is your little heart? And that's how great God is. Now, parenting, you do the same job over and over and over and over. You say, pick up your socks. You say, brush your teeth. You say, have you done your homework? You say all these things. How many times? Over and over and over. So how do you know if you're a loving mom? Because as you say the same thing over and over and you get so sick of it, you are kind and you are patient. And there's no trauma and there's no turmoil and there's no confusion in your household. Now, you don't have to be rich and highly educated to be loving and patient. You can have nothing and know very little. And you can be loving and patient. And you see, God is no respecter of persons. So it doesn't matter what your background is. It doesn't matter where you came from. It doesn't matter how you were raised. If you have a desire to be a good mom or a good dad, then you can be. Love is not proud, and love is not haughty. And then love hardly notices when others do it wrong. Is that you? Now, I've always said I'm glad it says hardly. Because if it said never noticed, I'd say, well, buddy, I have flunked that. But what does it mean, hardly? It means when your kid does you wrong, and your child will do you wrong. Let me tell you, your child will do you wrong. You can do everything right, and your child will do you wrong. Do you hardly notice? Now, the last thing the Bible says about love is the best. It says love never fails. Now, I want to tell you that love guarantees success as a parent. Now, it doesn't guarantee what your child will do. Because your child is like a sheep gone astray, and what's he going to do? whatever he wants to, right? And so love doesn't guarantee that your child's never going to go off and do anything wrong. Love doesn't guarantee your child won't break your heart. Love doesn't guarantee your child won't disappoint you and go off and do all those things you taught him not to. But you know what love guarantees? That when the job is over, because you were a loving parent, you don't suffer guilt. You know, I think if I hadn't learned what I learned a long time ago, I would probably be a drunk. I would be on pills or I'd be a drunk, because I used to scream at my kids so bad. I screamed at them until my throat hurt. And then I'd put them to bed and I'd look at their little sweet faces asleep and I'd feel so guilty. And I would cry and I would say, I'll never do that again, and I did it again. And I used to feel so guilty. Have you ever felt guilty about the way you treated your children? Can you imagine being that way for all these years, and when they're gone, it's over? So love guarantees that you'll feel good about yourself when the job is over. And that's real important, no matter how your children turn out. But you know, if your child's needs are met emotionally at home, there's a much better chance that you can influence them for good.